Let me ask you something. How many people do you know who spent $20,000 on rooftop solar panels and still complain about their energy bill? Probably more than one, and if you push them on it, they'll give you the same answer. The system isn't producing what the salesman promised. But that's not a sales problem, that's a physics problem. And the physics was settled more than 100 years ago by a man whose name almost nobody in the solar industry will say out loud. Today we're pulling the numbers apart layer by layer, explaining exactly why a $100 mirror beats a $20,000 roof array at the one job you actually needed done, and showing you how to build the whole thing this weekend for about $100 in hardware store materials. Your panels have a ceiling locked into the material itself, not a ceiling manufacturers are racing to raise. A ceiling the laws of physics have permanently nailed shut. It's called the Shockley-Queisser limit. The theoretical maximum efficiency for a single-layer silicon photovoltaic cell is 33%. Real-world commercial panels land between 20 and 22%. The all-time laboratory record after 6 full decades of research and billions of dollars in material science investment sits at 26.7%. Nobody is cracking 30% without stacking multiple cell types and tripling the manufacturing cost. The 70% efficiency number we're building toward tonight isn't anywhere on the silicon roadmap. It never was. The physics closes that door permanently. Here's exactly why. Sunlight is a full spectrum. Infrared on one end, ultraviolet on the other. Silicon's band gap, the property that lets it generate electricity from light at all, only responds to a narrow slice of that range. Photons with too little energy pass clean through your panel and do nothing at all. Photons with too much energy hit the cell and immediately dump their excess as waste heat. Your panels actually lose efficiency as they get hotter, which is why they need cooling just to maintain rated output on a hot summer day. The uncomfortable summary is this: roughly 75% of the solar energy hitting your roof on a summer afternoon becomes heat and never becomes electricity. That's not a defect in the product. That's silicon doing everything it is physically capable of doing. You paid $20,000 for a system whose core design constraint is throwing away 3/4 of the fuel that hits it. Now here's the part that should genuinely make you angry. Even at 22% efficiency, the financial case for rooftop solar would still hold up if the electricity your panels produced actually stayed in your house and displaced power you'd otherwise pay for. In most states, it doesn't work that way. Peak solar generation runs between roughly 10 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. During those hours, your panels dump power into the grid, and the utility credits you at wholesale rates somewhere around 3 to 6 cents per kilowatt hour. Then evening comes. Your AC kicks on against a day's worth of stored heat. The sun is gone, and you buy that same electricity back at full retail, anywhere from 12 to 30 cents per kilowatt hour. That spread runs against you every single day for the entire 25-year warranty period of your system. In a market like Phoenix, that arbitrage alone costs the average rooftop solar customer about $700 per year. Multiply that across 25 years and you're looking at $17,000 of value transferred directly from your pocket to the utility, stacked on top of the $20,000 you already handed to the installer. The product marketed as energy independence is actually running a financial pipeline that flows the wrong direction, and the meter on the side of your house is quietly clocking that loss every single night. And the deal is getting worse over time, not better. Net metering, the credit policy that made rooftop solar financially viable in the first place, was designed in 1996 when panels were rare and utilities wanted to encourage early adoption. Now that nearly 2 million American homes have panels on the roof, utilities across the country are rewriting those rules to crush the credit. California cut residential export rates to under 3 cents per kilowatt hour in 2023. Every homeowner who installed under the old rate structure is now spending the rest of their warranty period subsidizing the grid for essentially nothing in return. So why does the federal government only fund silicon? The 30% investment tax credit that drove the entire residential solar boom applies exclusively to photovoltaic systems. Solar thermal trade groups have been lobbying Congress for inclusion for 2 full decades. Every year, the amendment gets killed. Concentrated thermal solar, The technology that outperforms silicon on the most common household energy loads has been locked out of federal incentives since 2006, not because it doesn't work, because the people who wrote the policy had no financial stake in it working. The silicon ceiling is physics. The financial trap is policy. But the real story is older than both of them, and it starts in Egypt. Frank Schumann was an American inventor who in 1913 opened the world's first commercial solar power plant outside Cairo on the banks of the Nile. He wasn't working with semiconductors or electrons, he was working with mirrors and pipes, which is an honest description of what sunlight actually delivers and what most human energy needs actually require. 5 parabolic trough reflectors, each one 215 feet long, curved to focus incoming sunlight onto copper pipes filled with water. The pipes reached 400 degrees Fahrenheit. The water flashed to steam. That steam drove a low-pressure engine that pumped 6,000 gallons of Nile water per minute directly into surrounding cotton fields, replacing coal-fired pumps that had been financially crushing local farmers for decades. 6,000 gallons per minute from curved mirrors and copper pipe. In 1913, no fuel, no grid, no electrons. Schumann's core calculation was simple. A parabolic mirror concentrates incoming sunlight to between 15 and 30 times its normal intensity at the focal line. At that concentration level, the absorber pipe reaches temperatures unconcentrated sunlight could never produce on its own. No semiconductor required, no rare earth elements, no inverter, just a curved reflective surface and something to carry the heat away. The efficiency of solar thermal conversion at concentration runs between 65 and 75% for direct heat output. That number is documented in Schumann's original patents, confirmed in peer-reviewed solar engineering literature, and independently verified in every commercial concentrated solar plant operating today in Spain, Morocco, and Nevada. So why don't you own one? Because in August 1914, every investor pulled funding overnight when the First World War broke out. Schumann had been in active negotiation to scale the Egyptian design across 20,000 square miles of the Sahara, enough capacity to power the entire industrialized world at the time on solar heat alone. The British government was seriously interested. German engineers were running parallel studies. The war ended both conversations simultaneously. Schumann died of pneumonia in 1918. His patents transferred to the Carnegie Institute and were never commercialized. The Mahdi plant was eventually dismantled for scrap steel during World War II. 60 years of proven, working physics buried under 2 wars and a century of cheap petroleum. When solar came back into serious conversation in the 1970s, the people running the research programs were semiconductor engineers coming out of the integrated circuit boom. They had silicon, they had manufacturing infrastructure, and they had political backing from an industry that already knew how to build at scale. When the Carter administration funded renewable research, the money flowed to photovoltaic because it mapped onto industrial systems that already existed, not because it was the thermodynamically superior choice for most household loads. Concentrated thermal got classified as a niche utility-scale technology, pushed out of the residential conversation, and that framing held for 50 years. Here's where the 70% number connects directly to your backyard. That figure describes sunlight converted to usable heat. If you want electricity out of that heat, a turbine step brings net efficiency down to about 25%, essentially tied with silicon. But here's the thing. Roughly half of what your household consumes isn't electricity at all. Your water heater needs heat. Your radiant floor needs heat. Your shower needs heat. Your dryer needs heat. For every one of those loads, a parabolic trough feeding a hot water loop beats a silicon panel by a factor of 3. And that advantage is permanent because it's written into the physics of the energy itself. The upgrade that pushes the whole system even further is a spectrally selective coating on the absorber pipe. Standard matte black paint absorbs light reasonably well, but radiates about 70% of the captured heat back out as infrared. You collect it and lose most of it immediately back to the sky. A black chrome electroplating or a cermet coating absorbs 95% of incoming visible light and emits only about 10% of infrared back outward. The pipe holds onto nearly everything it captures. That single $10 swap at a hardware store pushes the Schumann calculation roughly 60% higher than the original 1913 design. Here's the full materials list. A 4 by 8 foot sheet of polished aluminum runs about $25. A 10-foot length of half-inch copper pipe is around $20. 3 sections of rigid plastic pipe for the curved rib frame cost about $15. The selective absorber coating is $10. A borosilicate glass tube to encase the pipe and eliminate convective losses runs about $15. An insulated storage tank or sand battery covers the last $15 to $30. Total, roughly $100. The build takes 1 weekend. The plastic ribs bolt into a parabolic curve. The aluminum sheet flexes naturally into that same shape when you fasten it across the ribs. No special tools required. The copper pipe runs along the focal line, sitting about 10 inches above the deepest point of the trough. Sunlight hitting the full 4-foot width of aluminum gets compressed down onto a half-inch pipe. That's a concentration ratio of roughly 96:1. The pipe sees the thermal equivalent of nearly 100 suns. In direct, unconcentrated sunlight, a copper pipe maxes out around 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside this concentrator with a selective coating, the same pipe hits 400 degrees in about 15 minutes. Tracking is far simpler than anything on your roof. Orient the trough north to south, and the sun arcs across the sky perpendicular to it throughout the day. No tracking motor, no electronics, no monitoring app. A wing nut on each end of the rib frame handles seasonal tilt adjustment 4 times a year. The stored heat has 2 practical paths. Run the loop through an insulated 50-gallon tank with a heat exchanger coil inside, and the water in that tank sits at around 170 degrees Fahrenheit. A full day of hot water for a family of 4, ready and waiting after the sun goes down. Or build a sand battery, a wooden box 3 feet on a side packed with dry sand with the loop coil buried inside. Sand holds heat for up to 48 hours after a single charge and feeds back into your domestic hot water system long after dark. The average American household pays about $800 a year heating water with natural gas. This $100 system eliminates 80 to 90% of that bill. Payback period, 6 to 8 weeks of summer operation. After that, every gallon of hot water your household uses for the next 30 years costs you nothing. Your installer never mentioned any of this because there is no federal rebate, no licensed contractor pathway, no installer commission, and no monthly monitoring subscription. The entire economic structure of American residential solar was deliberately built to keep concentrated thermal invisible and silicon in every conversation. Frank Schumann's calculation is sitting in engineering libraries right now. The materials are on the shelf at your hardware store today. A curved aluminum sheet and 1 afternoon is the only thing standing between you and 70% solar efficiency. The solar industry spent a century making sure you never knew that number existed. Now you do. Go build something.